to Easy Eats. My name is Chef Yves Dechaine, and we're here in the Green Villagers Learning Kitchen with Jenna White from Jenna's Nut-Free Dessertery. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jenna.
Thanks for having me, Chef Yves.
So, Jenna, today you're going to share your Banic with us. But before we get to do that, let's learn a little bit about you. I've had your Banic as in a breakfast sandwich and all that fun stuff, which is delicious, and I want to know more about that. So I'm super excited to have you on the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this today.
Sure. So first and foremost, I am the mom of 3 wonderful teenagers who are wonderful most of the time.
Yeah.
I am also the founder of Jenna's Nut-Free Dessertery, which, as you mentioned, I started at the Boyce Farmers Market 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then 3 years ago, during the pandemic, I decided to take it a step further. And I opened my first brick and mortar. We're over in the industrial park in Lincoln Heights area, which is a strange place, but it's also a fantastic place. We've had a lot of luck since we've moved there, and it allows us to do our food production as well as the restaurant and bakery.
So you've got the space.
Exactly.
Right,
we have lots of space, and we have the ability to have that light production in one building. So we're not paying for 2 different locations to do 2 different things.
So I noticed your business is called Jenna's Nut-Free Dessertery. Why nut-free?
Well, in my early 30s, I ended up being dealt an unfortunate blow. Put the kids to bed like I had done countless times before and sat down with my box of chocolates, except for this time I went into anaphylactic shock. It was a terrifying ordeal, especially where it was the first time I had ever dealt with any sort of food allergy, and it was like the most extreme it could have been. So I'm lucky I lived very close to the hospital, and we have some wonderful doctors there. But it was a huge eye-opening experience, not just because of the scariness of the event itself, but afterwards you realize the world's not exactly designed for people with food allergies. You have to now read every single label for everything you bring into your house. You have to read menus meticulously. Going to bakeries is a thing of the past. And it's a hard adjustment. It's not just for you, it's also your whole family and your friends and work. Like, it affects a lot of people. There's a ripple effect there. And having that happen, coupled with me losing my eyesight, made me realize anything can happen at any given point. So if you have something you want to do, there's no better time than now. So I started that little farmers market booth because if I was not the only person having a hard time finding safe food.
No, absolutely, you're right.
So I wanted to give some freedom back, because this whole entrepreneurial journey for me has been about regaining some of my freedom after those 2 life-altering events, and being able to use my business as a way to help give other people back a little bit of freedom is kind of a wonderful way to spin that unfortunate incident in my early 30s.
Well, and you're absolutely right, because bakeries and even restaurants and stuff like that, and especially if you have a dire allergy, you never know. I know that when we would get specific things in the kitchen, we would move to a different spot, we would clean, and just because it is prevalent, so having a nut-free space to be able to offer that definitely an advantage, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we wanted that to carry on into our bring home products as well, all of our baking mixes, so that way you're not just safe when you're coming into our location, but you're bringing home safe products as well.
The Banic, where did that start?
So for me, when I started giving back that little bit of freedom to other people and taking back that freedom for myself, I realized I had an opportunity to not only provide safe food for people, but I had an opportunity to use food as a way to share culture with people. And once I moved into that larger space, all of a sudden I had a much larger kitchen, and I had the ability to build out a menu that was way beyond desserts, and I was able to put those cultural elements in, because food can get people to the table and get important conversations started. This Banic mix is kind of twofold, because it's the same recipe we use in-house, and it's the same thing people can go make at home, but it can also be an actual educational tool for teachers. We have a lot of teachers who buy it, so when they do get into Indigenous history in their classrooms, they buy the mix, they make Banic for their students, and they bring it in the morning, so they get that tangible piece of history alongside it.
Which is fantastic, and I've always said the same thing: is food is the great equalizer. Everybody meets at the table, and and it's a great way to showcase how you've grown up, because different foods, even in the city, even in the province, north, south, everyone's eating something different, something traditional to them. So, and you being an Indigenous woman, proud of your culture, I think it's fantastic, and kudos to you to push that, because I mean, I think that people need to know more about our First Nations. People need to know more about what they're seeing in the news. We need to hear it firsthand, and really make it relevant, and that's great. And you're doing it through food, and I think it's the easiest way, and it's the most approachable way to do it. So you have the dessertery, but what? You have all kinds of other things going on as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the dessertery it's a very deceiving name, because the desserts are a very, very small portion of what we actually do. So we have the breakfast and lunch restaurant, as you know, in the same location. We also own one of 3 flour mills in the province.
So a flour mill. So right in the same space?
Yes, so we actually had it custom built in Austria.
Oh, wow.
So this
Cool.
is a European standard grade flour that we get. So I actually have to call it freshly milled wheat.
Okay, cool. And then that flour you're using?
In-house.
In-house.
Correct. And what I love about it is it still highlights that New Brunswick products. So we only mill wheat that has actually been grown here in New Brunswick, and it's what we use for our provincial cookie. It's what we use for everything. And the flour itself, because it's unbleached, and this special mill that we have is a stone mill.
Okay.
So it works at a very low speed, which means it provides very little heat. So we're actually retaining the nutritional value of that wheat berry when we're actually milling our flour.
So you're going back to ancient tradition to get it done.
Exactly.
So the reason for the milling of the flour, was it because you were having a hard time finding a good source of flour?
For me, being able to get my hands on that safe product that I know is nut-free was a huge driving force, but also learning how different flour can be when it's milled differently. When it's not milled in that industrial fashion, it completely changes the taste. It even though it is nut-free, it still has that bit of a nutty taste. So for someone who was able to eat nuts and enjoy those flavor profiles, I really like the depth that these freshly milled flour brings to our products.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And you're right. It feels different. It smells different. It's really, really nice to work with.
It is.
It's not in everyone's budget, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
But again, that's fantastic. And you were also telling me before the show started, you are you represent the province as well as a chef.
Yeah, so
You're
I
chef
get to
ambassador.
do lots of different things. So I'm listed on the province's website under their chef series, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
I've had a lot of great opportunities come my way. I've gotten to cook with some pretty big names, both in Indigenous culinary and outside of Indigenous culinary, which is kind of one of those things that just continues to inspire you to do better each time, because when you have the opportunity to get into the kitchen with so many different chefs, you learn so many different techniques.
What kind of tips or techniques do you use to really put the focus on Indigenous culture when you're making it? Is it just the recipe? Is it just, is there stories that you bring about?
So I use food as that vehicle to connect people.
Absolutely.
So a lot of the time we go back to food history, because food history is not what people think it is. And it is a way that we can really drive home that a lot of people have already adapted Indigenous traditional ingredients into their everyday lives. They just don't understand that that's where those ingredients originally came from.
Absolutely.
So we try to weave stories, whether it's about the history of the food or the growing techniques of the food.
So great stories, great chat. So right after the break, you'll show us how to make Banic, and then let's go through traditional ways. And we've got one method, but we'll talk about other ways to do it as well. So we'll be making Banic after this short break. Welcome back to Easy Eats. Again, we're in the Greener Villages kitchen with Jenna White from Jenna's Nut-Free Dessertery, as we found out that you do more than just desserts. Yes. And you're going to show us how to make your Banic recipe. Really simple and easy. Before the show I was saying, and we were kind of joking, that I was like, I'm glad that you've got the Bisque of Banic, because
Absolutely.
you can just throw it together and
right.
it's fantastic. So
I'm taking all the guesswork out for you.
perfect. So show us how.
All right, so this is our Banic mix.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. I'm going to do the whole package at once.
I mean, Banic is pretty simple.
It is, and you can totally find recipes online, but this is my special recipe. And the only way to get your hands on it is to go to Sobeys or online or one of the many stores that carry our products. So, one thing I really like about Banic is here in Turtle Island, or also known as North America, a lot of people who have come from the British Isles. And not everybody knows that Banic is actually something that was brought over by Scottish fur traders and were adapted by Indigenous communities.
So that's why the Newfoundlanders have toutons, which are very similar to Banic, if not the same recipe.
It's not the same recipe, but it is very similar. Yeah. The method of frying is the same.
Yeah.
But the Irish have soda bread.
Yes.
The Scottish had Banic, and now the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island have adapted and turned Banic into something that's kind of our own.
Okay.
So we have our own methods of doing things. It is one of the most versatile doughs on the planet. I am convinced of it. You can turn this into anything from pizza to the best cinnamon buns you've ever had to breakfast sandwiches and eggs Benny like we do in the restaurant. Like it
well, that's it. And I mean,
endless.
During the powwows in the summertime with the Indian
tacos,
tacos, those
yes.
are fantastic. My favorite.
Absolutely.
And Banic for me is a staple in my backpack every time I go hunting.
Yes.
Like my paracord, like my hiking boots.
And your fire starter.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I have a bag of Banic in there.
Yes, and that's part of the reason it became such a huge staple in Indigenous communities is because it was able to travel. It makes great survival food for the simple fact that it fills you.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like it fills you whether you have just a small piece or whether you have a large piece, and it can be made anywhere. So today we're doing pan frying,
right.
which would be more like a tautan, and it gives you that beautiful crust and that crunch on the outside.
Yeah, and that's the way I like to enjoy my Banic. Or if we're camping, you wrap it around the stick and cook it like a marshmallow, right?
Correct. Or you can actually use a flat stone.
I've done that too, yeah.
And you can heat that up on the fire and do it that way. So that would be a little more akin to how the Scottish did it. So the Scottish would make their bannock and leave it on their hearth to cook while they made their dinners. Okay. So there was always bread going. And that's one thing that I love is so I myself, I am Métis, and part of my Métis heritage is Scottish.
Oh.
So Banic mix is really special to me for so many reasons because it allows me to honor so many of my ancestors at once.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's very simple. I've literally taken all the guesswork out. Once you dump your package into your bowl, you're going to add 1.5 cups of water and 1/4 cup of oil, and you're going to mix it until you get this beautiful dough consistency.
So yeah, it's slightly sticky, not too dry. For the people at home, it's kind of sometimes with these mixes, you kind of don't really know what to look for. So yeah, you're kind of looking for a soft, shaggy-ish kind of dough.
Yeah, and I mean, if you prefer a drier dough, if you're out in the woods or anything, you can just slowly add your water. If you find it too dry, you can add water in.
Yep.
It will correct itself, but if you are not somewhere where you have access to either more Banic mix or flour, if you've added too much water, it's really hard to overcorrect. So it's a lot easier to just go slow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
And one thing I like about it, and I don't know if other chefs do this or not, I like to let my Banic dough rest for a few minutes because it not only does it allow the gluten to relax, but it also takes away some of that tackiness so your hands stay just a little bit cleaner.
Exactly. So you said gluten. We both know what gluten is,
Yes.
but a lot of people don't know. So can you tell us what gluten is?
It's what makes best visualization for me is everyone's had either a mom or a grandma or somebody who's made fresh bread.
Yes.
So that part of that process is your dough. When you reach into your dough and you pull and you see all those beautiful webs, that's essentially the gluten, and that's part of the protein, that's from your wheat berry, which is part of the process of milling. So a lot of people unfortunately have gluten intolerances. You can make Banic with other flours. So traditionally the alternatives would have been like acorn flour or birch bark flour. But I have seen people successfully make this with chickpea flour. All right, so when we're ready, we're going to actually have our pan.
And how hot
warm.
do we need our pan to be?
We don't want it to be super, super hot. It's best to cook your Banic a little on the slower side because we're going to be working with oil. For those of you at home, if you're not familiar with pan frying or working with oil, it's always a great idea to have baking soda beside you. I know that sounds crazy, but it is the best thing to put a grease fire out.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So just keep that in mind. If you are doing this at home, it's a good thing to keep on. So we're going to put enough oil into our pan that the whole bottom's covered, and we want it to come up the sides of the Banic ever so slightly. I'm just going to move my braid out of the way here.
Now, we're frying it today, but like we said, there you could do it over the fire, but you can also do it in the oven as well, can't you?
Absolutely. So if you want, you can bake it in a circular loaf, which would be the traditional Scottish way. Or it doesn't work quite as well to make it in a bread loaf. It's not levied the same way as a traditional bread. So it doesn't work quite as well. It won't rise. Or you can make like little tea biscuit style or roll styles in the oven. And what you're going to do is you're going to actually cook it at 350, and it's only going to take about 20-25 minutes depending on your oven. So it's still a very quick process for making a bread.
And it's really quick. It's something that you can put right on the dinner table. They'll go with any meal, really, right?
Absolutely. So I personally like rolling my Banic out and kind of creating like little circles. It's just a habit I've gotten into because it makes great breakfast sandwiches or individual toasts or anything like that. And as you can see, because we let that dough sit for a second, we actually have no tackiness.
Perfect. So yeah, a lot of people don't know that. People, you don't, things come together. Because it's quick doesn't mean you have to be quick about making it, right? So take the time, let it relax, and again, as that gluten relaxes, it gets less sticky, less tacky, so that way you're not, and again, we hold Bread Mondays is what we call it, where people come in and they make bread every week.
I love that.
And it's fun to watch the first people coming in, because when you're making a batch of bread for the first time, everybody's fingers are full. And I always say, I promise you, the second batch you make will be so much easier. Don't give up. So and that's what it is. It's patience. Allow it to have that time.
Yes. So this is turning golden pretty quick, so I'm going to turn our heat down ever so slightly.
Well, absolutely, and we're cooking in cast iron as well, so for those at home, cast iron holds its heat really, really, really well. So we could almost, at this point,
shut it off,
turn it off, and then just and then let it go.
The residual heat, I might do that, just so we don't end up burning the Banic.
Absolutely. Are there any other Indigenous food experiences that we can take part of, or that you're hosting?
So we do our traditional meal series, which is something I started pretty much when we opened the restaurant. Opening the restaurant and allowing people to try simple things like traditional soups or Banic breakfast sandwiches, or having those little twists on traditional, like familiar foods to people with those Indigenous twists, it really showed me there is an appetite for Indigenous cuisine. So I started our traditional meal series, which is an opportunity for people to come and enjoy 3-course fine dining experiences right in our restaurant. And these are dry events. Some of the artists that are featured on the walls in the restaurant are in recovery. So we like to keep that a sacred space for them, which is kind of appropriate since we didn't have alcohol with our traditional feasts before. So it's nice to bring that back. I'm just going to rotate our Banic here to allow a little more even cooking.
Well, and that's it, those techniques. I mean, Jenna's using her fingers because
Sorry.
cooks have no more feeling in their fingers, and that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, but that's okay. But I'm telling everybody, oil's hot,
Please
so
don't do this at
use
home.
your tongs and all those other fun things, So we're going to let these finish cooking, and we'll be back after this short break to serve these up. Welcome back to Easy Eats again in the Learning Kitchen with Jenna White from Jenna's Nut-Free Dessertery, and our Banic is almost done. We just had a couple minutes, and how do you know when it's done, Jenna?
So one of the things I like to do is if you push on it, when it's hard, you know that dough is cooked on the inside. When it's got a little bit of give, you're almost guaranteed to have that pocket of raw dough.
Yeah.
Keep in mind there's nothing in there that can make you sick. You can eat it raw and it's not going to do anything to you, but it's so much better
cooked. But it's a textural
cooked, right?
thing, exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about Indigenous education, and in the light of our of our history and stuff in our nation and stuff like that. We want to get a positive connotation to our Indigenous culture. We want to know about our First Peoples here. Do you go around to the schools? Do you offer? Have the schools asked you to come in and teach, or is it just on your own through your Indigenous experiences through the restaurant and things like that?
So mainly it's been on my own through the Indigenous experiences we offer through culinary, whether it's our Banic experiences or the fine dining or the different opportunities we've had to cater for places like the ECMAs and stuff. However, it would be great to get in and start talking to some of the younger people. I've had the pleasure of doing a couple university lectures, but that's it. And I mean, as wonderful as that is, it would be incredible to introduce Indigenous foodways and show the work that's being done towards food sovereignty to young people. Because not only do we have young Indigenous people in our schools, but we have young people who are in school with our Indigenous people, and they don't look at them as any different, and they would love to learn, and they would love to have that connection. It would be beautiful to see that communicated better through the generations.
Absolutely, and is our First Nation community here supportive to your endeavors?
Oh my goodness, I have such a beautiful relationship, not only with our First Nations communities here in New Brunswick, but I've been fortunate enough to forge an incredible relationship across the Atlantic. I find we're all a very tight-knit community, whether we're all from the same province or the same actual community or territory. Everyone wants to see each other do well and wants to help uplift each other, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's why I do the festival, that's why I do those things, because it gives us an opportunity to put some of our Indigenous chefs in the spotlight and give them an opportunity to work within their own traditional ingredients in a completely different light. So instead of having those humble feasts within our families or our communities, we're showing that those humble feasts can be fine dining. Those can be world-class experiences. And to give someone the confidence to do that, that's when we're going to see amazing things happen in the culinary scene.
Absolutely, and a lot of our Indigenous chefs don't know their culture, and they're learning as they go as well. So the pride in learning about your culture and things like that must be just fantastic. I mean, in yourself, I'm sure you're learning something new
all the time,
every day, right?
It's been a huge way for me to reconnect with my culture. It's not just my family. A lot of families have lost touch with a lot of those traditions over the generations because of what's happened across the country.
Absolutely.
And for me, food has been a way to not only have me reconnect, but my family reconnect as well, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
English, French, Indigenous, Métis, we all landed on this rock, and we need to get along and move forward.
Well, I think that there's always a way to move forward in a good way together, and I love that you have taken the positive road and view point for all of this, and I think that's a beautiful thing because it is something that should be celebrated.
And these are ready. They look fantastic. They smell so good. They remind me of times with camping with my folks, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
It's hot.
It is, and it's the way I like it, nice and hot like that. No, really, it is. I like fresh bread right out of the oven. I'm a sucker. I've got Teflon lips.
Okay, I like my fingers.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing this Banic recipe with us. Everybody should go and try your stuff. Absolutely. The mill thing was super interesting, and I'm super excited to kind of see where that kind of produces and comes from. And
when we get our new grain, you come on in and I'll show you how it works.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.